we're made in the image of God. So,
Yes.
And we have Adam is granted the right and the responsibility to subdue and to name and to put everything in its proper place, right? And Eve to bring to Adam's attention the things that remain outside his purview. And those are real things.
Yeah.
So human beings have something real to do.
Yeah.
And so then you might say, real and important. And you might say, well, what makes something real? Now, this is a hard question. You know, and the materialist answer is, well, let's say sensory evidence. But I don't think that's right. I think what makes things real is death and limitation. Like if you're playing a game, if you're playing a video game, a first-person shooter game, it's a game because when you get killed, you're not dead.
Yeah.
It's not a game when death is in the in the offings. Yeah. And what we're doing as human beings is real.
Yeah.
And the price we pay for reality, it looks to me like the price we pay for reality is death.
Yeah.
And it's real. Yeah. And so that's going to have these consequences. And I think, you highlighted the most, at least arguably the most painful of those consequences. People think there's nothing worse than death. I think, well, you have a limited imagination, first of all, because there are many things worse than death. And one of the things that might well be worse than death is the death of a child.
Yes.
I think it's a very rare parent who wouldn't happily substitute themselves in a contest of death with their child, if in a heartbeat even. And so now why does God demand that price of reality? I think it has something to do with the fact that we do actually have something important to do. We're supposed to be establishing the kingdom of heaven of God on earth. And that's hard, like actually hard. And the eternal enemies of that are sin and death. Yes. And those are real. And fighting them is real. And when you're in a real battle, there's real death and there's real evil. And that's brutal, but that's the price of reality. Now, then the question is, well, under what conditions is that price worth paying? And I think that's what the biblical stories actually attempt to explicate. The offering to Abraham, it isn't a life of ease. It's not a life of comfort. And it's not a life of hedonistic gratification. Mm-hmm. It's something like a life of adventure. Yeah. And I would also say there's probably no adventure without death.
Yes.
If you think about the movies that people watch, people will go watch secret agent movies and superhero movies. Yeah. The secret agent movies in some ways work better because the person is mortal and the depth of their commitment is measured by their willingness to put their life on the line. Yeah. So I don't know, it looks to me like this is a very weird thing, but it looks to me like without death, there's no reality. Yeah. And then you might say, well, that's a price not worth paying. It's like, that's an understandable argument, especially that's the sort of thing you ask yourself when a child dies. But then you said something also that bears on that. Well, you said the depth of your grief is proportionate to the magnitude of your love.
Yes.
And so you might say, well, how could God constitute a world made such that a child could die? And then you think, well, if you have a child and the child dies and you grieve, the grief is an indication of the magnitude of the loss. And so the fact that you grieve, that's a testament to the value of the life, even though it was truncated.
Yes.
So your grief is the proof of the value of the life.
Right.
And so what that means, as far as I can tell, is that grief itself is the justification of life in the face of death.
But then there's the afterlife. And I believe in the afterlife. And I believe in heaven. And I believe in it more than I've ever believed. I've always been a student of heaven as a Christian, and the Bible speaks so much of heaven. But when my son went to be there, I wanted to know more about it. And as you read the Bible, you realize that heaven is a real place for real people to do real things. Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. And heaven in the Bible is pictured as a city. It's pictured as a country. It's pictured as a paradise. The Bible tells us we'll eat in heaven. We'll be reunited with loved ones in heaven. We'll be active. And then one day heaven comes to earth in what we call the millennium. heaven and earth become one. So I believe very strongly in that. Now, can I prove it? Well,
what do you think that means? So let's delve in. That's such a hard topic. Let's delve into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So Christ tells his followers to be perfect, like his Father in heaven is perfect.
Yes.
And there's continuous injunctions in the Gospels to bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth.
Yeah.
That's central to the Lord's Prayer. And there's an idea that lurks in the opening chapters of Genesis about the reestablishment of the eternal Eden. And so it looks like there's an insistence that the goal of the true religious striver is to establish paradise on earth, something like that. And I mean, that can take some vicious utopian spins that are very counterproductive, but that's the underlying idea. Now, I don't know how to reconcile that with the idea of, so that's heaven. That's the heaven that people are striving to bring about when they aim upward properly and walk up Jacob's ladder. And I don't know how to reconcile that with notions of the afterlife with regard to death. We have the strange insistence on the part of Christianity too that Christ defeated death and evil, in spite of the evidence that death and evil continue in this world unabated. And so there's a paradox there. Like, how do you reconcile in your own mind the insistence that part of the Christian moral pattern is to perfect the world and to raise the material up to the heavenly with the notion of the afterlife and immortality? I know that's a terrible question, but
no, it's
I'd like to know your thoughts on it.
Well, I think coming back to the statement of Jesus, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Bottom line, nobody can be perfect. We fall short. So the point of that to me is we sin against God. Now, some of us sin more than others, but we all sin. We had a little Halloween event at our church, and we had one of those, the bell where you hit the thing with the hammer. And so I've hit that and hit the bell in the past. So I got it out and I hit it and I got so close, but I never got it. I think I spent a half hour trying to ring that bell and I fell short. So God has set perfection. That's the standard for humanity. Well, who can be perfect? Answer no. And that's where Jesus comes in, because the Bible says, why were we yet sinners, Christ died for us. So going back to the Garden of Eden, our first parents sinned. And because they ate of the forbidden fruit, which, by the way, the Bible never says was an apple. I don't know where the apple came from. But it was something that was very attractive. If you ate of it, it would give you this supernatural wisdom, knowing good and evil. Supposedly, that's what the lie was. They ate of the fruit and sin came into the world. So if Adam and Eve had not eaten of the forbidden fruit, we wouldn't die. Mm-hmm. If they had not eaten of the forbidden fruit, we wouldn't age and get sick. If they hadn't eaten of the forbidden fruit, I'd probably have hair right now, right? So these are the effects of aging. But here's the thing, is that the earth, life on earth is not everything. This is the before life, then there's the afterlife. C.S. Lewis, what did he call it? He had a phrase for it that he used often in his writings about Shadowlands. That's right, Shadowlands. So the idea of Lewis was that what we're seeing now at its very best, take the greatest moment of your life with your friends, having a meal, enjoying life together, maybe a beautiful sunset. It's a shadow of greater things to come. It's not like earth is the real thing and heaven is the imitation. It's actually, according to the Bible, the other way around. Heaven is the real thing. See, going back to Abraham, he was looking for a city that had foundations, whose builder and maker was God. He was looking for something he never found in all of his journeys. And I think it was a longing for the afterlife. And we all have that longing. And one day when we get to heaven, I think we'll see that the greatest experiences of earth were only a shadow of greater things to come.